Hey, ladies, welcome to episode 23 of the Health, Life, and More podcast for women. I am so excited about this episode. I have our first ever male guest on the podcast. And guess what? It is my hubby. Okay, you probably guessed that from the title because this is Ask Us Anything about marriage and relationships. We got amazing questions. I'm talking an entire full page of questions from you out there that we are going to tackle today. And I noticed as I was prepping for this podcast, it is episode 23, and our anniversary is the 23rd of June. I mean, it's totally meant to be. All right, let's dive in. Welcome to the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast with certified health and life coach, mom of four, and just all-around lover of all things 80s, your host, Jennifer D'Amato. Buckle in, let's get started. Hey, ladies. Like I said, I'm so excited because I'm sitting here in my closet with my bestie next to me. My husband's here. We are about to answer your questions about marriage and relationships. Or we might just stop recording right here and just make out.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I mean, we totally could. The kids aren't in here. We're in the closet. Doors are shut. So maybe we'll just hit pause and then come back to this. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So I wanted to give David just a moment to tell you a little bit about himself because I know you probably don't know much about him. So, babe, tell us something fascinating and wonderful about you.
Hello, ladies. I'm honored to be here today, and some interesting facts about me. I've been working in the automotive industry for the last 20 plus years. It's hard to believe it's been that long. I'm an engineer by training, currently a manager in the company that I'm working at. What else is there interesting? I love the outdoors. I enjoy going to the beach. I enjoy hiking. I enjoy just being outside and seeing God's creation and all the cool things that He has for us to discover and find and see. And it's just something I enjoy.
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth, ladies. I had never been on a hike before until I was with this guy. Seriously, never hiked before. And now we do a lot of things outdoors. One of our greatest hikes actually was a year after David had had a total hip replacement. And he had that because he had a leg Perthes, which is a birth disorder, right?
Birth defect.
Disorder.
Is that how you really feel about me? I'm the disorder in your life.
Okay, birth defect. And we were celebrating a year out from that, and we hiked Camelback Mountain here in Arizona, which is really a difficult hike. And this is before we worked out regularly, like we weren't really in the best of shape going into that hike.
And it was also a year out of hip replacement surgery, so I was still getting back into the groove with my strength of my legs. So
yeah.
It was a technical hike for sure, and but it was awesome.
It was. And like I said, this girl did not hike. It was not something I ever did. But he does love the outdoors, so it's definitely something we've incorporated into dates even. Oh my gosh, this guy has made me go on like a 24-mile cycling ride on a date.
Yes.
I'm not kidding. We'll talk about dating a little bit. But seriously, one of our dates was we have this canal path near our house, and we have actually ridden 24 miles of it on a date. That's what we decided. We actively decided, oh, what would be a fun date? Let's go ride bicycles all day.
I highly recommend if you're planning to do something like that, you wear cycling pants because that's a lot of seat time. Guys and gals.
I agree. He did buy me a great pair of cycling, capri length pants for that. Highly recommend it as well. Before we dive into the questions and answers, I wanted to give you guys just a little bit about us. So, we have been married at the point of this recording, it's been 18 and a half years.
18 and a half years. Where does the time go?
I don't know. I don't know. We have actually been together, though, for 22 at this point.
Almost forever times 5.
Forever. We have all right, I will tell you guys this. We'll try not to do too much of it, but we have so many inside jokes. It's like we're our own sitcom at this point. But anyway, yes, 22 years, 18 and a half of those married. We have 4 daughters, which I would say was never exactly the plan from the get-go to have 4 kids, but somehow the first one was really easy. The second one wasn't hard until we were already pregnant with the third. And at that point, we were like, okay. So we have 4 daughters, and we've lived in Arizona our entire marriage.
Yep. Moved here May before we got married, then next month of June. So been here as long as we've been married.
We, I would say, are self-proclaimed good communicators in our marriage. Not that it's always been easy to be good communicators, but our relationship started back in 1997 as friends. I mean, come on now. We lived in 2 different states. I was in Vermont and he was in Michigan. The first year and a half that we dated, all we did was talk and write letters and emails.
Email, the beginning of email.
There was none of this video. We didn't even have cell phones until later.
Right.
So landline conversations late at night, living in 2 different states, and all we did was talk. We saw each other on average every 8 to 10 weeks in person.
Right.
But we did a lot of talking and we got to know each other. And really, I attribute our deep friendship to that time period. Do you agree?
Definitely. Communication was key, and building our friendship and getting to learn about each other, what we liked, what we disliked, what made us happy, and what made us sad, and all kinds of questions. It kind of reminds me of how Emma questions us now with her, what was life like when?
Yeah. And we actually, it's buried away in this closet is all those letters. And we even printed the emails and cards that we sent. But we saved all of that. And I'm so glad that we did, because it really did build such a good foundation for us. People ask me all the time, because David travels for work, how do you do that? And I think it's because we had to communicate for that time period. Like, we had to talk and know how to talk and to be away from each other for so long, that we do it in shorter spurts now, but that we can do it and we know how to do it really well.
Yeah, definitely. I think communication is one of our strong points, not only as a couple, but also individually in our relationships with other people.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, because I'm always honest, we sometimes communicate loudly. All right. The other thing about us, we're both, I would say, fairly strong-willed and independent people. Right? Would you agree with that? He's like, you guys, I wish you could see the look I just got from him.
Yes. We both like to have our way.
That's so true. And that, honestly, even though we're not the same people we were in 1997, 1998, that part about us is still true. I don't think we necessarily dig our heels in, but we both believe we're right most of the time. And we've both had to learn how to be better listeners in our marriage, because talking, we can do. I mean, I do it professionally here, but
talking comes easy. Listening is the part that we had to learn to be better at.
Definitely.
Much better at.
Definitely. It's different when you're just listening to get to know someone than when you're listening to understand their heart and to go to a deeper level. And we had to learn to listen when it came to the things we were individually struggling with, because David, being an engineer by trade and being very technical and systematic, would want to solve the problem, right? If I had a problem, I was struggling with things early on in our marriage, just for work, whatever it was that was going on, raising the kids. And I brought that to him, his fairly automatic response.
the men's default. Here's the problem. How do I fix it?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
And of course, what did that do? It triggered an argument. It triggered a fight. It triggered me. It just triggered me because I didn't want a solution. I wanted him to hear me. And that took some work to get to that place where that's not your default anymore.
Absolutely. It was a lot of time in loud conversations. You're not hearing what I'm saying to you, and learning to be an active listener and not trying to come up with an answer while the other person is still communicating. And not only is that extremely helpful in relationships, but it's helpful in general in just communicating with other human beings. It's more about being heard than it is solving other people's problems.
Yeah. And I had to learn to shut up. I mean, I'm sure you're all shocked to hear that. When we were early married and we would have discussions, talks, arguments, whatever it was, I never gave space. So I would listen, but if it got quiet in the conversation and David didn't respond right away, I would just keep talking. I had to fill the space. And it actually wasn't until I would say on both sides of those where I had to point out to you that unless I'm asking for a solution, don't give me one. I just want to be heard. And that you had to point out that you needed time to think and space and all of that. Like it wasn't occurring to either one of us to do something different.
Yeah, and I think that was a big breakthrough when we had that discussion of how you weren't looking for problems to be solved, and I needed time and space to process what it was that you were saying to me so that I could then think of how I wanted to respond to it.
Yeah. And it still rings true. It still really rings true today of how we try to show up in the conversations. Not perfectly, but we really are just so much more aware of it at this point. And this wasn't any of the questions that came in. However, I want you guys to get kind of an idea of who we are. And this transitions pretty well into somebody had asked about love languages. If you're not familiar, Gary Chapman wrote this amazing book called The Five Love Languages. And the five love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. And the question was about, how do you speak to your spouse when they know their love languages and they're speaking to you in their own love language, not the spouse's love language. So what that looks like is, and this is way back when, we're talking 2000, like way back in our relationship at the time, because your love languages can change. It was probably receiving gifts for me.
Mm-hmm.
I love when David bought me things and he was so thoughtful and would buy things that he knew I really wanted. There's a white vest. I'm actually staring at the white vest right here because it was something I really wanted that he got and I still have it. Wow, my closet needs an updating. Anyway, and his at the time was physical touch. And so what was happening though is you were using the love language that spoke to you, which was physical touch, on me.
Right. And it's like me speaking a completely different language to Jennifer, and she's not receiving what I'm trying to communicate to her. So that was a big milestone, I think, in us learning about each other, our love languages, and what really speaks to the other person.
I agree. And I did say already that those things evolve over time, and to kind of be aware of that, there was a time where, and I'll tell you even now, like, I don't care about gifts. It's just not something that speaks to me. Acts of service was a real big one. And I remember when I acknowledged that that was the greatest way you could show me love, when you started like emptying the sink, you noticed there was a great benefit to you when I would see that you had cleaned out the sink of all the dishes and cleaned the kitchen.
Yes. To the point that I was taking pictures of the empty sink and sending them to my wife before she got home.
Let me tell you, if you want to get turned on, ladies, this is a key for your husband. Let him know what love language speaks to you. We were actually discussing this, knowing this question was coming up, right? That what is our current love language? And what's really interesting right now for the season that we're in is we're kind of experiencing the same one. Words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that I've ever heard that happening very often. There that could be, happening for you. But right now, we both are appreciating, feeling loved when we are affirming the other person, when we're speaking life into them and encouraging them and supporting them and praising them. Like that's where we're both at right now.
And acknowledging what you're noticing about the other person. I think that's just shows the depth of the relationship. Like, I see this in you, and I think that's great. And you should continue as part of the encouraging portion of that.
Yeah. And it's so key that your spouse knows what your love language is. They'll never know how to speak it if you don't tell them. I can remember not that long ago, of course, communicating to David that my love language, I could really tell it was words of affirmation. And I know it was because I stepped into this space of creating and running my own business and really just stretching myself that I needed his support and encouragement more than anybody else's. He heard that. I can remember the day I felt overwhelmed with excitement that I'm going to start a podcast. And he was the first person that I messaged. I actually sent him the graphic, the original graphic I had made. And I said, hey, I want to do this. And he was like, I've been waiting for you. Let's go. Like he was the biggest cheerleader and just telling me, you've got this. You're amazing. Can't wait for it. And I know you're probably my only male consistent listener to the
Every week.
podcast.
Although, based on the questions asked, I'm beginning to think there's some other male listeners to the podcast.
There might
Or
be.
some ladies may be encouraging their husbands to listen to the podcast.
This will be a great one, ladies, that you want to share for sure. But anyway, so the question was, what do you do when your spouse is speaking their own language to you and it's not speaking to you? The example I got from the person who asked this question, their spouse is acts of service. So he does all these great things, with cleaning or doing things around the house and all of that. But her love language is physical touch. So he's doing all these things and it's not speaking to her. And she's trying to explain, like, that's not how it works, but that's what speaks to him,
Right.
So again, she was asking, what do you do when this happens?
I think the key thing in a lot of this comes down to communication and communicating to your spouse what it is that you want from your spouse. Even the question came up today in my men's group, how do we support our spouse? And the easiest and quickest answer I had was just ask. Ask,
Yeah.
what do you need from me to support you in this?
Yeah. And that's a question I would say I hear you ask all the time. At least, I mean, of recently, I would say in the last couple of years, like you definitely asked that question of me. What do you need? And it's probably because we've run into this more times than not before. So we don't get caught up in that place where I'm serving you in a way that actually doesn't serve you.
Exactly. And the key point is, if I want to encourage you, I have to speak your language.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're hitting on a couple of things here is first of all, you need to know what your own love language is to be able to articulate what speaks to you. And then you need to communicate to your spouse what it is that's going to speak to you. And I think it's really clear. So we joke about the empty sink, but I was pretty clear with you that if you have an empty sink for me, because I was out or I was doing things, or at the time, if I was working on something, if when I come home, I will find a way to thank you in a way that is serving for both of us. That was a very clear communication of the benefit of you speaking my love language.
Yes. Very clear.
Very clear. I do think that, again, it's so important that communication is on the top of your list for a healthy marriage, to bring these things to the table. And again, it's not to say that you don't love, like right now, if David empties the sink, he knows that I love that. He knows it still gets my heart pumping. I love an empty sink. But what I love even more than that, that speaks, that fills my soul, is when he tells me that I'm doing an amazing job, that, he loved the podcast and tells me specifically what he liked about it. Or he just encourages me when I'm just, I'm working and working and working and, you don't always see stuff right away. And he just cheers me on. That is what speaks to me right now. That's good. So again, I really just want to encourage you, if you've never read Gary Chapman's book or you can go on the website and actually take the quiz and do all of that. You could do it together. We would just encourage you to step into that space, you and your spouse, take the quiz, see what your love language is, and then actually have a conversation about, hey, so this is what my love language is, and these are the things I would really love you to start doing or saying, or we do together. If there's quality time, happens to be, or physical touch for, one of you, then you actually communicate those things that would speak to you.
Yeah, and taking those types of quizzes may help you learn more about yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't really understand what speaks to you until you kind of go through an accounting of it and figure it out.
Yeah, no, that's really good. All right, we have a two-part question here from Lauren. She asked, how did you know you wanted to spend the rest of your life with your spouse? And what compromises should one make when looking for a spouse or in your marriage? Woo-hoo!
Those are some deep questions there.
All right, so how did you know you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me?
Wow. I don't know that I knew it at first that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. I really enjoyed getting to know you and becoming friends with you. And as the friendship deepened, I couldn't see a time without you. So I think that was significant in knowing that I wanted to get married to you and spend the rest of my life with you. And so far, it's worked out pretty good.
Yeah. I would say, I'm very much a romantic. You are too, but I remember after our first, I guess dates it was, because it was that New Year's Eve when I went to New York with your family and we spent that New Year's Eve in Times Square and all of that. And then you brought me back to my parents. This is January 1998. I really thought that, yeah, I don't know, that movie thought like he's the one. I did think that. I didn't know how it was going to all work out. I was 18 years old. We lived in two different states. And it wasn't, I would say it's more like what you're saying. It wasn't this like epiphany a moment of I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but it definitely was, I can't foresee not spending my life with you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think back, the people we were, because we got engaged in 2000, it's 2020 recording this episode, and we're not those same people.
No, not at all.
No, we've changed so much, and that's something like it, but you have no idea how much you change in 20 years. That if you're even thinking, okay, this person I want to spend the rest of my life with, that's not the same person you're doing life with 20 years later. I hope that we could value, ourselves wanting to grow and change, evolve and deepen and all these things that come with growing up, but we don't necessarily attribute that also with our spouse is going to do the same thing, and they're not going to be the same person 20 years into that relationship.
Yeah, we've been through lots of seasons of change and between you working, you not working, you homeschooling, me being at the job that I'm at, changing to different positions, to
Four kids,
different activities outside of the home,
Mm-hmm.
getting a master's degree for myself, and each one of those took communication. But I think the key point was that we knew that we were doing things for a time and that we were encouraging through it, and we were happy for the other person to see how they were growing.
Yeah. Which I think kind of we're going into that other part of her question was about compromises. And I don't think that's the word we would use, right? Like, I don't think we compromise who we are or what we want. But I think we also acknowledge that when you're in a marriage, in a healthy marriage, you want to sustain and grow and all those things, that you really have to be on the same page.
Yeah. And I use the word seasons to describe that because I think you have to agree, maybe to compromise for a period of time.
Okay.
But definitely it's a big discussion. It was a big discussion when I was going to go back to school and take my evenings from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. to be going through classes and doing schoolwork for 3.5 years.
Yeah, we were having babies still. Just FYI, y'all. We were still having babies during that time. But I didn't feel like I was compromising anything. I felt like I was, again, that was that communication part. I was hearing you. We agreed for a season that we would go through, though it felt like a really long one in the midst of it. But even as you're sharing it, it feels like a lifetime ago.
I know. Well, we finished that in 2012,
Yeah,
so
that was a lifetime ago.
it was at least forever ago.
It was forever ago. But it didn't feel like a compromise. It felt like we had to get on the same page. We know after many times of not getting to that place of being on the same page, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't, I didn't feel like I was compromising anything. I felt like I was supporting you, you
And I
know.
felt supported
Yeah.
totally through it. I mean, we weren't going to bed together. We weren't waking up together.
Yeah.
But we knew that it was just going to be for a period of time until I finished that, and then we would reevaluate and make some new changes to our life and how things were going to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great question, Lauren. Thanks for asking that one. We hope we answered it well for you. Hey, ladies, I can't wait to dive into the rest of this conversation about marriage, but I just wanted to take a moment right here and pause and say thanks for listening. I'm honestly so grateful that you download and listen to these episodes each and every week. Do you know another lady in your life that would benefit from this podcast? It would mean the world to me if you would just pause right here, click the share button, send it to her in a text message so she can listen in too. All right, let's get back to our discussion about marriage and relationships. All right, we have some pretty heavy-weighted questions that I just want to say if you are listening to this and there's little ones around, maybe you're driving in the car, I just want to encourage you to hit the pause button, either listen to this later or put your headphones in, because we are going to talk about two pretty heavy topics here, being money and sex. So we were just discussing this about early on how we had some really great mentors point out to us these two topics, money and sex, being the like make it or break it type of conversations, arguments, wins or losses in your marriage.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say we had some great mentors who brought that up for us. One in our pre-marriage counseling, and two, once we were married in the just married Sunday school group that we belonged to as well. We definitely were discussing these topics and how they are very key and instrumental in your marriage relationship.
Absolutely. We got a lot of questions about both topics. So we'll probably kind of skip around, but I want to make sure that we answer them. One of the first ones was addressing her money, my money, our money. Thanks for submitting that question, Eric. I would say, just to be really clear, we have never done the separate money, separate bank accounts, any of that.
Yeah, that as far as everything that we've learned, having separate accounts is really dangerous for a relationship. It's not building trust, and it also can affect the relationship and you wondering what the other person's doing with their money.
Yeah. And I would say if we really looked back, if there was a way to like separate into categories arguments or high volume discussions that we've had, money's on the top of that list.
Yeah, money for sure is
Yeah.
the top of the list.
And we've tried several different things. We haven't done it for so long that when we started discussing this, I was like, remember when like you had an allowance? Basically, I mean, there was no better word for it. Really, what that looked like, because I stayed home, I had zero income at that point coming in, and we were living off of just your paycheck, where you would have X amount of money to spend at will, from our budget.
Right. But it was definitely part of the budget that we created and used and followed to keep our expenses in line month to month.
Yeah. And something you had communicated to me, I can remember this way back when, was you just liked having the cash in your wallet for in case, or just having that. You know, in the world we live in now, I mean, we still lived in a time where you actually got a paycheck and you could cash checks and do all that. Everything's direct deposit. You never see the money that you're making anymore, right? We pay everything online, like there's no cash anywhere. And it was something at the time that was important to you to have the cash in hand.
Yes.
Yeah. So I heard that because it didn't matter to me. I had a debit card, it didn't matter the cash part. So we had tried that for a while and it worked for the season. We talk about seasons all the time, but it worked for the season, but it's not something we do anymore.
No, no, we have a combined account, and we know what our big monthly expenses are that we're paying towards, and then it's just a matter of following through the rest of the month to make sure that we're not overspending.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, another question that came in actually was about that, David, was, how do we make big purchases or allocate large amounts of the budget? And again, I know we're going to sound like a broken record on here, but we talk about all of it.
yeah, I'd say even last year, one of my goals for the family was to take the entire family to Hawaii on a family vacation. And that was something that we definitely had to save for, prepare for, and make some allowances for within our budget.
Yeah. And again, it was about communication and being on the same page. Again, those really are some fundamentals because you're going to hear us repeat them over and over. But we had to be in agreement, be on the same page, as that's what we were working towards or doing. And even some purchases, like a couch or our dining room set, which here's the thing, when what we've learned over time that we weren't as good at when we were younger is we take a lot more time to discuss it, think about it, decide what we want to do. It's not as impulsive. What, you're laughing?
Yeah, impulsive. Unfortunately, we fell trap to
Mm.
impulsive buys and purchased a timeshare our first year of marriage. And it's something we still pay for every year now, maintenance fees. And it's just a reminder of you should take your time to discuss really big expenditures and not feel captive to have to make a decision in the moment.
Yeah, I think we did a huge remodel on our house. We kind of were put in that position to do it. It was a whole issue, but I don't want to get into details of that. But regardless, it was a huge amount of money that we were going to be spending to do that. And we really took our time to be really thorough, not to be impulsive, to make educated, informed, be on the same page decisions with.
Yeah, I'd say even before we decided to spend that amount of money, we considered whether it was right to spend that amount of money or to invest as little as possible and divest of the home before we made the decision to continue and remodel the home we're living in.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've really learned, especially when it comes to money, it's across the board, but when it comes to money, these big purchases, and big could be, different for everybody. And it can be anywhere from $1,000 couch that we bought to a 40 plus $1,000 remodel to an expensive vacation, whatever it is. We take the time to talk about it. We really invest in letting it be kind of an open, ongoing conversation that we just kind of keep adding to before we decide anything.
Right. And I think it's important that each person contributes what their desired outcome looks like before the money gets spent. And then we then level on what it is exactly we're going to do, we're not going to do. That way, there's no surprises in the end when we actually either get to Hawaii or remodel the kitchen, and cabinets start coming in. We know what the desired outcome looks like.
Yeah. And because we do come from a place where it's one account, there's no her money. Even my business, like everything is ours. That's how we have chosen to approach it. And we find that keeps us just on, I don't know, level communicating. Like it's ours. We've committed to being together, being one. So we look at it that way. So entering into any of these conversations about money, it's ours.
Definitely.
I think that really does make a huge difference. These are some really good questions, some hard ones, because I mean, we do stuff this way and we don't discuss how we're doing it. It's just how we've evolved to doing it as a couple. So it's kind of good to go back and kind of put some words to it. Um, I think that was it for the money questions. I hope we answered those well. Because there was a question about saving, and I think we kind of addressed that as far as even our vacation. And we were on the same page, what we're saving for and those communication pieces that come into that. All right, so I think it's time to address the sex questions, babe.
Ooh, the sex questions.
We have some really good ones, and we might do just kind of, I'm going to throw those out there. We might do a little bit of jumping around, and probably some sharing. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. One of the questions was, how important is sexual communication in marriage?
Very important.
Like, number one, I mean, it's got to be right up there, number one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we can say that from a place of not having communicated.
Yeah, it was a little rough at the beginning.
Yeah, it really was. Like people talk about that whole honeymoon phase and all the first year of marriage. It really wasn't that way for us.
Welcome, you're married.
It wasn't what we were hearing from other people. Okay, really just one couple I can distinctly remember talking about the frequency and creativity. It wasn't like that for us. And at the time, of course, this is a very much younger versions of us. And at least for me, it made me feel like something was wrong and not realizing it was a lot to do with our lack of communication about sex.
Yeah, I'm noticing a common theme here about communication.
I mean, no doubt. Like it really is affecting every area of your marriage if you're not communicating about it. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about sex with their spouse, which is crazy because that's the person you're having sex with. But I know it also can feel a little uncomfortable if you're not comfortable with yourself. Early on in marriage, it can feel really awkward. And we're not just talking about the specifics of what you like when you are intimate with each other. We're talking even about how often you choose to be intimate, what your needs are when it comes to that, right?
Yes.
We had very different viewpoints on this when it finally got into the discussion of frequency.
All the time.
There's a question. We got a question about frequency and what happens when you're, did you say all the time?
Yeah, that was the expectation when we were getting married, was that married couples have sex all the time.
Oh, yeah. I was like, wait, what are we doing here? Wait, I know we're in the closet together, but hold up. Okay. One of the questions was about frequency, and that was our discussion. I was literally blown away. I still laugh at that one, that was the idea, was all the time. I don't know who misinformed you about that.
Well, it's not like you're dating and having to wait to get married anymore, so why not have it all the time?
Ladies, can we just take a moment here and you just feel for me that was the discussion? Because I was like, I don't know, once a week seemed like enough to me. Let's just say we were completely misaligned for a while on that.
Yes. And we didn't communicate well about it either.
No, we
Lots
didn't.
of high volume discussions.
Lots of high volume. But if you think about that, it makes sense why we would. I mean, that's a total misalignment. We're not communicating it until it's usually had hit the point of misunderstanding completely and feeling disconnected. What we got to was just the understanding that being intimate in a marriage is, yes, for pleasure. However, we call it the glue that holds us together.
Yeah, it definitely connects us in the marriage.
We were having moments of falling apart and feeling completely disconnected. And even to this day, I can tell, like, if we start feeling disconnected and I look and go, ooh, it's probably been a week, it's been a week and a half, or David's traveled, like we start feeling really disconnected because we view sex as glue in our marriage. It just keeps us together. We reconnect with each other on a whole other level than just talking.
More than just communicating.
Way more than just communicating. So as far as that question was about what if the amount, the frequency is completely misaligned, that you're on two different pages. What do you do?
I think you need to talk about it.
Well, I agree that you need to talk about it for sure. But I also think that's where, and again, I don't really want to use the word compromise, but I think there needs to be a level of understanding of the deeper reasons why. That sometimes, and knowing what I've been through where I wasn't feeling confident, I wasn't feeling as beautiful as you saw me, it was hard to want to be intimate. Yeah. And I would say there's that, not that it's just a woman that feels this way, but more often than not, if a woman's not feeling sexy, she doesn't want to be yeah, it's not going to happen. She just doesn't want to enter into that place. Or there were those seasons we went through raising young children where I was home all day with them and I wanted to run away from home. The last thing I wanted to do was feel like I had to give to somebody else. That was another season we went through. But what it took was actually verbalizing those things, saying the things to you of how I was feeling about myself or how I was feeling at the end of the day. Because I can remember when I started communicating to you when the kids were younger, how I was feeling, you stepped in another way to help with that, to alleviate some of it. And I think that actually led to our kitchen sink empty dirty text messages of the sink is
dirty
empty.
Dishes and clean sink.
I really think that's what led to that, though, because I finally communicated. I feel like I've got all this stuff, the kids are wearing on me, come home, finish cleaning, or at the end of the day, you stepped in when you understood that piece. And that at least helped with that piece of it.
Yeah, that was a key conversation in our relationship. And I would say also communicating the fact that intimate time and physical touch were my love language, were instrumental in helping you understand that I wasn't necessarily feeling as valued when we weren't being intimate and having long spans in between. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, communication is key in understanding, what's going on, how you're feeling, what's going on with me, how I'm feeling, and arriving at an agreement together of what is it that you want to do, how often you want to do, and
how often you want to do. I like that. I'm sorry. You're making an excellent point, and I'm just laughing because I know you.
But if it comes down to it, even as a couple, then maybe it's time to start setting some goals.
I agree. And I want to say that we've been through seasons as well, where, like you had mentioned about when you were back to school, we weren't going to bed at the same time.
No.
Or when we've had infants and teething toddlers and all of that. Again, with the communication, not that it was great communication back then, but at least to communicate that this is a short season of time where it's not as frequent.
Yeah.
And you were very understanding, but you were understanding because we had agreed upon this is a season that we're going through. David mentioned goals, and we were really just on the fence here of how much we were going to share, but we had noticed that with the busyness of our lives, because when you have toddlers, you think you're busy at home. When you have teenagers and preteens and so much going on, running your own business, travel for work, everything that's going on, it is so hard to be intimate as frequently as we would like. So David, this was a year ago, right? Because It was January 2019. Yeah, my gosh. He had approached me with a goal, and he knows, okay, this is how, when knowing your spouse is really important, he knows I'm a goal-oriented person, and I like to achieve goals. It works for my personality. So he set a challenge goal for us for frequency for the year.
For the year.
For the year. He averaged it out for us. I mean, let me tell you what, married to an engineer, very systematic, and he knows I'm a goal person and I like achieving goals. I love achieving goals. So he kind of set forth this last January, and we actually had a goal. And we broke it down where we kind of knew per month, like how often we wanted to be intimate to reach that goal. And it was a fun challenge.
I thought it was fun.
Yes. Yes, it was that kind of fun as well. I don't know if anyone's ever done this. I know I've heard of people who commit to like 30 days in the bedroom every single night, whether you want to or not. You know, you commit to each other that way. I've heard that challenge before. And that didn't really suit us in our personalities in our life, but the year challenge did, which did break down to kind of a month thing. And I think it worked really well for us that we showed up differently for each other because we set a goal.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one, it expanded frequency a little bit, and it definitely challenged us on some months. But again, it held us accountable, and we had to have communication. And it was a great goal.
It was the end result was very good. Personally, like we got to be proud of ourselves, right, for showing up that way. And then we also got to kind of push the other person because of course in an entire year, in 365 days, you're going to go through stuff. We're going to be, our kids are the worst interrupters of everything. We love them so much and we value our communication with them, but dang, they are hurting our sex life. There's going to be their schedules, your work, travel, my business, kids get sick, family stuff comes out. Like there's just going to be life happens. But I felt like even through all of that, we were able to keep coming back to this goal we set. I'm a big believer. Like if you have a goal, you write it down, you have something to work towards, it changes how you show up no matter what the goal is.
Yeah, and the objective of the goal, while it was put in terms of a frequency goal, the outcome was to grow in intimacy with my spouse. And regardless of the number achieved, I'd say we definitely maxed out and hit that goal.
Yeah. Now, I'll be very, very honest here to tell you, as soon as he approached me with this, my first reaction was totally like, now what now? Like, what are we going to do? Like, are you serious? And again, goal oriented, I was like, all right, it's a total challenge stretch for me, but I'm going to show up for it. And to the point where the end outcome was that higher level of intimacy, that I was like, so what's our goal for this year? You were surprised that I even asked that.
I was surprised.
That I was so excited that we had worked towards something and that the shifts that happened because we set that goal, I wanted to set another one. Not the same exact one, but that I do want to set another goal because of what happens just in setting that. We both, all right, I'm just going to just tell him, David, we didn't hit the number, the total.
No.
We came close. We did good, but we went through some hard times early on in the year that we weren't expecting. Some rough spots that we hit.
Yeah, some rough spots for me and some challenging times for you and some challenging times for our girls as well. So
yeah,
there were a lot of factors that went into sometimes valuing sleep more than sex.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being, and I just want to say that we didn't hit the goal, but when we got to that place where we saw the end number, yes, we tracked it. Yes. But yeah, if you don't track on your goal, how do you know if you've achieved it? But what came out of it is we're both really happy with how we showed up for it as a totality.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I said earlier, the goal was to increase intimacy in our relationship. It wasn't necessarily to achieve the specific number that I had set out for the year.
Yeah. So I think what I want to put out there for those that ask the questions, those that are curious, those that might be struggling, is what if you set a goal? And it could be for the year, it could be per month, it could be if you really want a weekly goal, though I think that's a harder one to achieve in this area due to all that comes up. But setting a goal to have a frequency goal for the year, I think it really does work well. I'll be like, I want to go for a monthly goal. Like that's and I told David this year I want it to be a minimum number of, that if we exceed it, great, but a minimum number per month of times that we're intimate, which again, I want to say, I love our daughters and that they want to talk to us at night, but they're really, really killing us here. And we have a better understanding of how we can show up because we set that goal. So I would challenge anyone out there to consider talking with your spouse. Ladies, what if you set a goal? It might challenge you. Maybe you're struggling in that area yourself because you don't feel that you need that level of intimacy as much as your spouse does. This could be a great opportunity to stretch yourself. It stretched me for sure. Maybe didn't stretch you as but okay. But it really did stretch you in the times
there were
where
times
you weren't.
that
Yeah.
it was a stretch for me.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm the one who put the number out there into the conversation. So, but yeah, there was some difficult times at work where I was completely stressed out and battling a little bit of depression, as well as, getting sick and traveling. And sometimes it's really difficult. And I don't think that the number was too huge of a stretch for a couple. But I know that it's probably difficult for some couples. The number, it wasn't unrealistic, but it wasn't, it wasn't too far of a stretch either. For example, like the 30 days, picking a month, I don't know how that would go. That would be pretty challenging to go be intimate 30 days in a row in 1 month.
Yeah, I don't think I'm signing up for that one. But I do think this also opened up the opportunity to be really filled with grace for the other person in the times where either one of us couldn't show up in the way we wanted to. Is we really did have to have a lot of grace in that time. Whether it was me or you, just to have some grace that, you weren't feeling well, or you were going through stuff at work, or I wasn't feeling well. The kids had, yet again, even as teenagers, mostly really drained me for the day, or they were in our room until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and they had a higher need. There was just a lot of grace given as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know this is kind of one of those taboo topics. People don't want to talk about it. And it's certainly not something we're just sharing with just anyone, just the podcast world and anyone who downloads this episode, of course. But I do think this has to be on the top of your communication. It has to be. And it has to be something you come back to again and again. Because we set the goal too, I feel like we talked about sex more this year, and not like in a way we talked about it early on in marriage of I'm not getting enough, you're not giving enough, I don't want to get, those discussions. But I feel like we just talked about it more and felt more comfortable because we had set the goal as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it goes hand in hand with how we increased intimacy in our relationship. Intimacy isn't only just sex.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to share something, but I think we're going to go into a part 2 of this because I want to talk about how we've really been able to serve one another in this area and show up. And it involves a crock pot and it involves a microwave. So I think what we're going to do is stop this podcast and save that for part 2. What do you think?
Sounds good. Those are some valuable lessons in there.
Awesome. We'll see you guys in part 2 of this podcast. Hey ladies, want to connect with me outside of this podcast? Come follow along on Instagram at Jennifer_health coach for life. That's Jennifer_health coach, the number 4 life. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search Jennifer Coach, the number 4 life. I also want to help you take your health, both physical and mental, to the next level. I want you to feel empowered. I want you to reclaim your body's intuition. If that's for you and you're ready for support and accountability like you've never had before, then why not book a free consultation with me by visiting my website, www.healthcoachforlife.com. That's www.healthcoach4life.com/request session. I've also made it really easy by including a link in the show notes below. For any questions about the podcast or to submit a question or topic you would like discussed here, you can email me at jenniferdamatopodcast@gmail.com.